sinuses. I have to tell you, in Sunday school class this morning, we were talking about the Reformation and Martin Luther, and I said, how can we compare Martin Luther so you can understand? And I said, well, in 1492, what happened?
Columbus sailed the ocean blue.
Yeah, Columbus discovered he discovered the Caribbean. Never quite got to North America. However, I said Martin Luther was born about the time that Columbus discovered America. It was the end of the Dark Ages, a time when there was a lot of illness in Europe, a time when people were very superstitious. They believed in curses and monsters and all kinds of evil running around them and ghostly creatures. And then my lovely son said to me, "Dad, are you as old as Martin Luther?" And I said, "No." He said, "No, I meant Martin Luther King Jr. And I'm not even as old as Martin Luther King Jr., but I do remember him. Never know what wonderful things are going to come from the mouths of children. Jeremiah is one of my favorite passages. Jeremiah talks about the law of God being written on people's hearts so that they no longer need to teach one another about it, but that the law is in them in such a way that they will know God. And I thought today, after what happened yesterday in the Jewish synagogue on Squirrel Hill in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that we really need to talk about what is it that God has written on our hearts when somebody who, and I don't know about what his personal claims were, but when somebody thought it was appropriate to go into a house of worship of our Jewish brothers and sisters and murder, now it's 11 people, and I think 7 who were injured, that we have to talk about what's on our hearts. Our president said they should have had an armed guard outside. My word is, the armor that you and I have is the armor of Jesus Christ, not the armor of guns and swords and slingshots, not the way of the world, but the way of God in Jesus Christ, to know that our strength abides in us. And perhaps today our low attendance has something to do with what happened at that synagogue yesterday. Maybe people are really afraid to come to church today in this country because we never know what's going to happen. But the question is, what are we afraid of? What has God written in our hearts? God has written in our hearts that His grace and love for us through Jesus Christ is sufficient. It's enough. It's enough in the face of all of the evil of the world. It's enough for us to know the safety of God's presence. I can't imagine if we had to arm Mr. Jim with a weapon. He might shoot himself in the foot. I don't know. And you don't want to give me one. Oh, my goodness, no. I'd injure somebody and myself, I'm sure.
I don't want to live in a country where we have to be protected like that. That's the way it is in Egypt.
Yeah, it's not a good thing for us to talk about needing to arm ourselves. And we've seen that in churches around the country where people have been shot up. There were other people with arms in the church. And schools too, that's right. It's not just churches, it's schools as well. We seem to be in a time in the world today.
No, America.
Well, it's in the whole world. It's not just in America. We seem to be in a time in the world today where that lack of consideration for places that are called to be sacred and who tend to be sacred must feel at risk for coming to worship their God. And it doesn't matter whether you're Christian, Muslim, Buddhist, it doesn't matter. All of us should feel comfortable, no matter where we are in the world, to worship our God. Now, we've had many, many hundreds of years in our nation of not being under persecution. But it kind of seems like persecution's beginning to happen again. to Christian people. Yep. And so in our lives, we really have to allow the words of Jeremiah and that writing on our hearts that God has done for us to know that we really are in God's care all of the time, not just here in the church, but all over every day in our lives, and that God does that for everyone. God's grace is what's written in our hearts. For people who are authentically Christian, who accept Christ, it is God's grace which is written in our lives. It is the ability to have compassion. It is the ability to find light in the midst of darkness. It is the presence of God in all things, in all places, in all ways. And we live in a time where we're kind of being told everywhere else that that's not the case. You know, I don't know if people are afraid to come to church. It never enters my mind that something might happen on a Sunday morning where I might lose my life. I might lose my life walking to my mailbox at night, the way people drive on golf links. You know, we have 90-mile-an-hour car races up and down golf links every night. All they'd have to do would be to crash through the bushes and I'd be gone. We never know. We never know when that's a possibility. When we might leave here today and find ourselves in an accident. Or we might have a heart attack. Our children's godfather, our older children's godfather, took one step out of his $250,000 motorhome in Texas one morning, hit the ground and was gone. After he'd had breakfast and coffee with his wife. We never know. You know, we never know whether what Judy Moses went through is what we're going to go through. That uncertainty always surrounds us, but where's the certainty? The certainty rests in God's presence in our lives. In God's gift of Jesus Christ, which assures us that we can't earn our way. We can't do it by keeping all the letter of the law, because we never can do that all the way. We can only do it by allowing God's grace to wash over us through Jesus Christ, and to live every day with the presence of God's Spirit writing on our hearts the power of God's love for each one of us and for all people. So we need to remember that on this Reformation Sunday. Perhaps it's time for the church to renew again the thinking of Martin Luther, that the power of Christ is the power that we need in our lives, not the power of human weapons, not the power of vicious words, not the power of any of that stuff, only the grace of God in Jesus Christ. Amen.